Welcome everyone to a conversation with sports photography legends Jean Fruth and Darren Carroll. We've been missing sports lately, like many of you, and we thought it'd be awesome to speak to two of our friends, and not only present their work on their own, but have them speak to each other and have a nice conversation about sports photography, where they got their start, etc. So let me introduce our two guests here. Our first guest is Jean. Jean is a New York born, San Fran based sports and portrait photographer. She's the co founder of Grassroots Baseball and a traveling photographer for La Vida Baseball. She's one of Sony's 45 artisans of imagery worldwide, and she's been a photo shelter member with us for 6 years. So, welcome, Jean.
Thanks, great to be here.
Our other guest sitting here as well is Darren Carroll. He's also New York born, but Texas based sports and portrait photographer. He's an award-winning contributor for Sports Illustrated, ESPN, Forbes, Golf Digest, and more. He is also the photography consultant to the PGA of America, and he has been a photo shelter member with us for 15 years. So he's been with us for quite some time. Welcome, Darren.
Hi, everybody. Glad I could be with you.
Yeah, you've been with us since the very beginning, huh?
Yes, I have. Back when it was just getting started. Let's put it that way.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us, both of you. What we're going to do is run through some of Jean and Darren's favorite photos, and then we're going to run through some questions that we prepared about how they got their start, what mentorship means to them, how they got their big break, etc. So we're also going to be taking live questions. So be sure to find that questions box like we mentioned at the start and submit your questions so we can keep track of those, and so that we can discuss and answer live. Let's jump to the first photo. We can run through these awesome images. Jean, I believe this is your first photo, correct?
Yes, this is Didi Gregorius at the Oakland Coliseum, the visiting dugout. And I chose this image to talk about because we are talking about mentors today as one of our topics. And this photo to me represents my early days of shooting baseball and mentors that mean so much to me. And my first experience shooting in a major league ballpark was at Oakland Coliseum, learning from Michael Zagaris, better known as Z-Man to all of those who know him. And Z's a legend. And for Michael, everything about baseball for him, all of his images, it's really before the game even starts. He is the ultimate behind the scenes shooter. And that's who I learned from. And if you've seen Z's images of the locker room and his behind the scenes, they're very unique, they're iconic. And I got to be side by side with him for many years of shooting in front of the visiting dugout, where in Oakland is very unique. There's no railing. It's the only major league ballpark left that doesn't have a railing in front of it. And before every game, we were hanging out there. He was chatting with players, telling incredibly funny stories, and also knows his baseball history like no one I've ever met. And so he knows them, he knows where they've played, he knows where they went to school, he knows their fathers and where they played and where they went to school, and he photographed them before the players he's talking to. And we would be there with our wide angle lenses making these fun, candid shots, great portraits. And for me, I thought that's how every major league ballpark worked. I thought that's what baseball photography was making these fun, great, candid images with wide angle lenses. And I wouldn't be the photographer I am today if it wasn't for Michael Zagaris and this wonderful experience that I've had with him.
So great. Darren, I know you have a photo here as well. Let me jump to that.
Okay.
Such a great shot.
This is Tiger Woods, obviously in the pre-social distancing era. It's from the 2012 Barclays at Bethpage Black out on Long Island. And I picked this picture because it's a good illustration of how a lot of things need to come together in order to make a sports picture work. You need composition, you need nice light, you need to put yourself in the right place. And sometimes, not all the time, and I'm going to make that point later on as well, you need the right person in the frame. And this picture probably wouldn't have happened if it weren't Tiger Woods for several reasons. First of all, only Tiger could hit the ball on the first tee that far left to wind up next to an ice cream cart. And all of these people wouldn't be following Webb Simpson or pick another golfer. It's only because it's Tiger that everybody is closing in on him like that. So that's it. The person in the picture, the composition, the lighting, the angle that you choose, all of that goes into making a good sports picture, and sometimes it just all comes together. So this is one of my favorite pictures ever, and that's why.
Such a scene, right? Love the shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I love going in and looking at all the different faces in there, and just remembering what absolute chaos it was when his ball went over there and all of these people just started charging down the hill to follow him.
Sure. Another one from Jean here.
So this picture means a lot to me because it really represents my grassroots baseball work, and grassroots baseball is about telling stories. And this is in the Dominican Republic in a region called San Pedro de Macorís, and one of the poorest regions of the Dominican Republic, and lack of equipment, such poor playing conditions, no, grass, rocks. There's, just so much that these players have to endure to get to where they want to go. And San Pedro de Macorís is such a small region in the Dominican Republic. Over 50 major league ball players have come from this region. Guys like Johnny Cueto, Alfonso Soriano, Rico Carti, many famous players. And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to tell stories. We're storytellers. And this to me shows the grit and determination of what these players, how they are, and just what they're able to accomplish, starting off with where they're at and being able to move to professional baseball, to the major leagues, and sometimes to the Baseball Hall of Fame, like Vladimir Guerrero. And grassroots baseball, and baseball looks different in different places. And to me, this is the Dominican Republic and tells the story of those people.
When was the last time you were over there?
I was there 2 years ago. Was my last time, but I've been there many times and in all the regions, and I go there to shoot Winter League Baseball and Caribbean Series. And Winter League Baseball is a lot of fun in the Dominican Republic, and their fans, every day looks like the World Series. Their stadiums are filled, and but I also love, baseball is everywhere. It's present on the streets, street ball, wherever you go, you're going to see baseball players and kids playing baseball. And it's a lot of hopes and dreams and aspirations for so many people. And when they do make it, it not only changes their life, but it changes their entire extended family's life. So, it's a very big part of their life, a big part of the country.
Yeah, I'm sure. Special. Love that. This is a great shot from Darren.
This is a charreada. Charreada is a form of rodeo that's mainly practiced down in Mexico, and I live in Texas, relatively close. And Mexican Americans and Mexican immigrants have brought this sport up here, and they compete in a team-like setting around San Antonio and Austin, and there's even some up in Dallas and Houston. It's not a very publicized sport. I mean, it's very well attended within the community, but it really doesn't exist outside of the community. I was looking for a personal project to do, and I had stumbled upon this in an exhibit at the Texas State History Museum and was really curious about it, and managed, with the help of another Austin photographer, Julia Robinson, find the right people to talk to, and sort of got to know some of them, and started going to these. They kind of told me where they were, and I get to know the organizers, and just go down on weekends when I wasn't doing anything else. And this is the result. I think I like this picture a lot, just because it represents that the idea that personal work can be so rewarding and so fulfilling. I was only doing this for me. I wasn't doing this for a magazine. I wasn't doing it for a book. I wasn't doing it for a promotional piece. I was just doing it for me. And sometimes you find the best pictures when that's who your client is, when you're your own client.
Right. So for this kind of
Darren,
sport, oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
Darren, out of curiosity, where are you when you took this photo? You're up pretty high.
So a Chariota arena, you have to picture an old skeleton keyhole if you're looking down at it from above. There's the circle where they do most of the roping events, and then there's a long chute up at the top where they do events like this. This is called colliadero, which is their version of steer wrestling. The horse and rider come out of the chute, the steer comes out along with them. Now, in American rodeo, you would jump off your horse, grab the steer by the horns, and wrestle it down to the ground. These guys ride up next to the steer, grab its tail, spur the horse, and as the horse shoots past the steer gets turned around. And that's how you get the steer on the ground. That's the way the cowboys did it down there, and that's what they have brought up here. Anyway, at the intersection of the circle and the chute, there is a tall judge's tower, probably about 30 feet up, and it's a rickety little contraption. I had never shot from up in one of these before, and I finally, in my rudimentary Spanish, got up the guts to ask these guys if I could come up there, and they told me, absolutely, but there's only one condition. And I said, what's that? And they said, we'll tell you when you get up here. So I climb all the way up with my cameras, and they pull out a bottle of tequila and a shot glass and say, you have to have this. So
One condition, that's funny.
that's it.
I love this shot. I was going to say, so it's a bit exclusive. You have to kind of be in the know for this kind of sport to attend this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not within the community, it's a big deal, but they don't publicize it. They're not in it for the money. There is no prize money. It's really just pride. They do it in teams of 5, and often those teams are family members, from young kids to fathers to grandfathers. And it's kind of the way they pass along these traditions within the family. And that's what it's for. It's not for, publicity or for money or anything like that. They do it for themselves.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Jean, spectacular shot by you.
So this is Yankee Stadium a few years ago, a playoff game. And it was first pitch was slated for 4 p.m. and I was in my photo position and thinking about what the light is going to be like with this 4 p.m. start. And it was very exciting to me to think about how beautiful it can be. October light at Yankee Stadium is very unique, that late afternoon. Beautiful sunset. And so I made the decision and there's obviously hundreds of photographers there, and we're all waiting for, our next Aaron Judge home run. And I make the decision to leave my spot and go to the upper deck to try to make a picture and capture that late afternoon light. And my thought is, the Yankees will be in the playoffs again next year, and most likely it's going to be an 8 p.m. start. And so when will you have the chance again? Maybe, but maybe not. And to be able to chase light, and not everybody obviously is allowed to do this. If your job is you have to capture every home run and every play, well, then you can't. But if you have the opportunity and you're able to tell stories, well, then it's about taking chances, which is why I'm showing this image. It's really about, as you mature and as you grow as a photographer, and if you're able to do that, and the only way, to get, what you're looking for. You know, you want at the end of the day is about trying to make an iconic picture, you know, an image that is going to be memorable after someone turns their phone off or after they close the book, you know. So it was a special moment for me because after I got up to that upper deck, which is not easy when Yankee Stadium is filled with that many people, I was so excited by the light and how beautiful it was. I decided to go outside and I shot the facade and the sun setting on the facade and how beautiful that golden low light is. And, you know, it's just a good aha moment for myself and my own photography and what I want to be. And, you know, it's about taking chances. I watched David Burnett yesterday, 2 days ago. He was doing a webinar like this, and he's, to me, the master of taking. He's always in a different position. He always has a different camera than everybody else, you know, and that's what he does. He's the master of it. So, you know, it's learning that and, you know, moving positions, taking chances, and that's the way you grow and learn, and that's how you have a chance to make something special.
Definitely. Were you at the dugout to start? Like how long was the journey from your?
I was on the first concourse on the third base side, but we were on a platform lined. I was next to the Long Island Newsday photographer, and just even climbing down and getting out of there and navigating through concourses. It really actually would have been easier had I been on the first because I could have used the tunnel, but so I was navigating concourses to get to the top. And then of course, going outside and going through security with your cameras and getting back inside and going, you know, through all of that. And so sure, I missed a lot of the game and I did miss Aaron Judge home runs, but that's okay. You know, I have those too. And, you know, like I said, you know, being able to take a chance and make something that's memorable and that you're going to want to show right here today, you know, and we've all seen plenty of Aaron Judge home runs.
Mm-hmm. Looks well worth it, in my opinion.
It was worth it. Oh, well, thank you.
Awesome. This is a spectacular shot as well, Darren.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. This is Serena Williams at the US Open last year. I put this in here because, in a sense, I was really lucky to get this picture because ever since they put a roof on Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is basically the main court at the US Open, if you've never been, it's drastically cut down the amount of quote unquote nice light that you get in the afternoons. It used to be this gorgeous late afternoon light with a shadow moving slowly across the court. And if you were seated in the photographer's pit, it would be backlit. You could get some really, really nice frames. But now that nice light lasts for maybe 10 minutes. And of that 10 minutes, there's a little tiny sliver where you, if you're ready for it, you can get lucky. Do you make your own luck by being ready for it? Sure, but then Serena also has to run into the right spot and she has to hit an overhead, which makes her pick her head up and things like that. So yes, you make your own luck as a sports photographer, but sometimes it takes a little bit extra.
Right. So many things have to line up for this shot to be taken. I love that.
Right. And listen, this goes on. I mean, US Open goes on for 2 weeks. You could sit there for 2 weeks and never see this. This is the only thing like that I shot over that period of 2 weeks. I trust me, I was out there on center court for that, or on Ashe for that time of day every day. And this is the only time something like that came together.
Right. Maybe it's different for an assignment or something like that, but as a photographer myself too, like, do you feel when you get a shot like this that you've done your job for the day or something like that? Like a bunch of the other photos might not matter as much?
Well, I mean, it's satisfying to see something like this, but my job at the US Open when I'm working for the USTA and for usopen.org is to deliver pictures of every match that I'm assigned. Now,
sure.
Is it going to be a picture like this? No, but you need a nice action picture of every player, of every match that you're assigned, and you need to turn it around fast. We've got a great team that works behind the scenes to do that. You know, I'm shooting tethered and it's going back to a bunch of editors who pretty much in real time are seeing my take and sending it to the social media folks, sending it to the web folks. So I like to think of it as for like 15, 20 minutes a day, I get to say, all right, wait a minute, the light's coming and it's time to go play. Make sure I get the pictures of Serena and whoever she's playing so that we've got that, and make sure I get pictures of the next match. But for 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to take advantage of what we have because it might be the only opportunity you get to do something like this.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. So now that we've talked about some of your favorite photos, we prepared a couple of questions and we want to kind of speak through that. So we could start with Jean here. How did you get your start as a sports photographer? We'd love to know.
So I started as a portrait photographer, not because that was the direction I wanted to go, but it was where the opportunity presented itself. And I was working with 2 women in Northern California, and it was all black and white film. And we were on location, and then eventually we had our own studio. And while I was a portrait photographer, I was also coaching my son's rookie ball team and then Little League team. And I submitted photos to the local newspaper of all-star games. And they asked me if I would take some other levels of all-star photos. And I did and sent them. And they hired me to shoot high school and college sports. And I went to my first Friday night lights football game and absolutely loved it. I was also very bad at it and wanted to learn. I thought I knew football, and you think you know a sport, and then you get there, and my experience wasn't. I didn't have great success my first shoot, and called a friend of mine, Baron Woolman, who's a dear friend, who was the first photographer for Rolling Stone magazine. And he connected me with Michael Zagaris, who I talked about earlier, the Oakland A's photographer for many years, but also the San Francisco 49ers photographer for many years. And I learned how to shoot sports really with the Z-Man, both baseball and football, and all the Bay Area photographers who were incredibly giving of their time and knowledge along the way. Like to this day, I got to work with a wonderful group of photographers. So I was very fortunate, and that's how I got my start.
So the intro to sports for you was kind of through your children and them getting involved in sports.
Yeah, I my coaching career went to the 7th grade. My son's going to be 23 now, but yeah, so it really did start with shooting, and to this day, I mean, it's the grassroots game is where I'm back to. It's what I love really the most is not only kids playing, but just the amateur game on every level, and just what that is. Darren talked about who the player is, like, and sometimes that's important, and sometimes that's not important. It's about making pictures. And the amateur game, there's so much that can be done and telling those stories. So but as soon as I started shooting sports and then working for these papers, and then they grew to 5 local newspapers, 5 local papers, and I was shooting all kinds of sports for them. And it was just a fabulous experience, and the adrenaline rush and what's going to happen. And, it's the same thing I feel to this day, going on a shoot, and I'll certainly feel it when we're back out there shooting again, is what. And there's nothing like that. So I'm grateful to have it.
Awesome. How about you, Darren? How did you get your start as a sports photographer?
All right, I have to preface this by saying that my parents were threatening to hop on this yesterday, so I have to parse my words a little carefully here. I got my start as a sports photographer because I had a car in college. That's why. I went to Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and way back when, I'm seriously dating myself here, the basketball team, which was pretty good, again, I'm dating myself, played in Landover, Maryland, which on a good day was about 45 minutes away from campus. The only people that could cover the games for the newspaper, the school newspaper, were people who had a car. And my freshman year, I was, I think, pretty sure the only one on our photo staff who had a car. And so I got to do the majority of the Georgetown basketball games out at the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland. As a result, I got to sit next to and watch and eventually start talking to sports guys from the Washington Post, USA Today, and the team photographer for Georgetown basketball, Mitchell Layton. I don't know if anybody knows Mitchell. Maybe Mitchell's on here. I don't know. But he was also the photographer for the Washington Capitals and for the Washington Bullets, who are now the Washington Wizards, speaking of dating myself again. And he taught me how to light an arena with strobes, the way he did it for basketball and hockey. So first of all, thank you, Mitchell. Second of all, thank you, Mom and Dad, for letting me bring the car down to campus my freshman year. And from there, I started assisting Sports Illustrated photographers in Washington. I moved to Austin to go to grad school at University of Texas, and Sports Illustrated started hiring me to light arenas in Houston and Dallas and San Antonio for their photographers. And from that, I just started developing relationships with the editors there, and they started letting me shoot really minor assignments here and there. And then one day I went into the office when I was back in New York visiting my folks to meet all of these editors that I had talked to over the phone. And I met the golf picture editor, a guy named Ward Haynes, who said to me, hey, listen, if you ever want to go shoot golf, I don't have anybody that really wants to do it week in and week out. So if you got any ideas, let me know. And I flew back down to Austin and heard on the radio that the Texas Open down in San Antonio was happening in a week, and some guy named Tiger Woods had just committed to play in it, and it was only his second tournament. And so I called up Ward, and all of a sudden there I was in my first golf tournament. I'd never been to a PGA Tour event before, and I'm shooting it for Sports Illustrated. And that was pretty much my start from there.
The rest is history.
Yeah, such as it may be, for better or worse.
Let's see. Now that we heard about your start, let's hear about a big break moment for you and how it impacted your career. I think the first photo we have for this is for you, Darren, so we can hear from you.
All right, so back in 1998, like I said, I was assisting for Sports Illustrated, and one of the things that assistants had to do in addition to lighting arenas was get remote cameras set up. This was the big home run chase year with Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. They went back and forth, and the big question was who was going to break the record of 61 home runs in a season. Sports Illustrated sent, it doesn't get much better than this for a team for shooting anything, let alone baseball, for Sports Illustrated back then. Vijay Lavero, Walter Yost, Heinz Klutmeyer, John Beaver, and Dave Clutho. And they sent me as the only assistant, which meant that in between at-bats for all of these games that we were following them for, I had to run around Busch Stadium in St. Louis and change 8 different 35 millimeter remote cameras and 2 cameras that took 100-foot bulk rolls of film that shot 80 frames per second. I had to do this and then get back in time to get up to my position where we decided the radio triggers would reach the remote cameras, which was up at the end of an aisle, at the bottom of a staircase in the mezzanine, just above the first base dugout, which is the Cardinals dugout. And the baseball photo editor at the time, Maureen Grice, now Maureen Kavanaugh, said to me, well, listen, while you're up there, just why don't you bring a camera and a lens and put your film in the envelope with everybody else's, and if you get something, well, maybe we'll run it, who knows? So for a couple of weeks, I sat up there. I was buying beers for people all around me because I was blocking their view, or I was having them watch my 400 while I ran around the stadium and changed all the remote cameras, and it was still there when I got back. The whole thing happened, the season ended, I flew home. It was a Monday night, right at the end of baseball season. Maureen called me. She said, listen, I just want to say thank you. You did a great job helping everybody out, and we really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, you got the cover. Thanks, goodbye. And that was my sort of big break. It's the first Sports Illustrated cover, and I consider that sort of my biggest break in the business. Organic
And
story.
it looks to, and for those who can see webcams, it looks to be sitting behind you as well.
It is. Signed copy, thanks to Karen Carpenter at Sports Illustrated and my wife, Jessie.
That's awesome.
Such a great story.
What about you, Jean? What's been a big break moment for you?
For sure, my biggest break was becoming the traveling photographer for the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. It was an incredible experience for me, and it was a time when my job was to tie the contemporary game in with history, and it was for attracting a younger audience to social media was becoming much more important, and the museum wanted to attract a younger audience, attract more people to their social media channels and to their website. And they had just updated their website, and so it was a really interesting time. So traveling and shooting the game and shooting the contemporary game, but figuring out a way to tie it always back to history, to bring it back to the museum. So it really forced me to become a storyteller, and that just came with, tremendous growth for me and a learning experience and stretching myself, to a place that I hadn't been before. And it was really an open canvas as to what I was shooting, and it became far more reaching as time went on. And I was shooting for their magazine Memories and Dreams, and for their archives and the museum exhibits, and then special projects with Hall of Famers, and of course for their social media outlets and website, and then doing some photo essays as well for their website. And it turned me into a storyteller and changed the way I look at things, the way I shoot, and really set me on another path.
I think that's a unique experience, is connecting like history and contemporary photography, like historical archives with new and exciting happenings in sports.
I mean, there's no better sport to do it in for me than
Sure.
for baseball, because of how deep, the history runs, and learning about the history, was at the same time for me, and how deep it all goes and how everything ties back, and all the history of these stadiums and who played there. And it really, you can just go down one rabbit hole after another. And there's so much research, and really just an enjoyable project for me, always thinking about it in that way. And it's, still what I do today, even just with my grassroots baseball work. It's really the same. It's right. You're telling stories and tying it back to this rich cultural history of baseball around the world.
Absolutely. We could jump to our next question. So speaking of, organizing archives, etc., how do each of you organize a lifetime of photos and stories? And what's your number one organization tip? I could start with you, Darren.
Well, Photo Shelter, obviously. It's an invaluable resource. And then, hey, it may sound like a plug, but I mean it. Like the ability to have everything that I shoot at my fingertips online and be able to organize it so quickly and shift things around on my website or to provide to clients or things like that, it's invaluable. I mean, I just can't emphasize enough. But the most important thing is that you establish a workflow for yourself, whether it's naming conventions or putting in metadata right at the time that you shoot the pictures, because it's no good to you. You can have the best system in the world for storage and retrieval, but if you can't find what you're looking for, you're screwed. So my organizational tip, and I did not do this way back when, and I've regretted it ever since, but I've started being a lot more cognizant of it, is to get everything captioned, get it keyworded, put your metadata in on everything. Then you will have the files you need, and you can send them wherever you need to send them. I'll go in, edit my raw takes, upload every single raw picture that I take to Photo Shelter, and then I have different directories where I do the high res from my edits from those takes also. But I have the actual raw files there if I need to go back to them. But I'll edit in Capture One, process it, or edit in Photo Mechanic, process and capture one, and then send everything out. I have JPEGs that are Retina screen resolution that I keep on my laptop. I have much smaller JPEGs that I send off to the copyright office every 3 months. And then I have the high-res versions that I upload to PhotoShelter that I can then put on my website, or I can send out to clients, or I can mark up as prints for sale, or however that works. So yeah, first of all, have a good organizational system. And second of all, get your metadata right the first time.
Solid advice. How about you, Jean?
Oh, well, really, I mean, it's a lot of what, Darren is saying. I mean, I'm not naturally an organized person, so having tools and having organization, things like PhotoShelter, and being able to use those to help guide my organization is really important to me. I mean, I'm certainly the last person who should be giving advice about organization, except for, don't do what I did in the beginning. So, I mean, and it's really taught me a very valuable lesson. So what I can say is that it is so much easier to do things right the first time. And for sure, that's captioning your photos correctly. And its keywords are so important. And especially to me, and, I'm working for La Vida Baseball now, and say they want Mexican fans. Well, if you don't have the keyword in there, you're not going to find it. And it just makes it so much easier when you have it. And I must say that my files are in very good shape right now, because we certainly don't have any excuses right now to not be doing the work, right? So I have been doing the work and catching up, and going back to my older files now and cleaning up all of those. And I'm in pretty good shape and feel really good about it. But it's garbage in, garbage out, good quality in. You're going to get the reward for that. And doing things right the first time is so much easier than going back and cleaning up messes. So, all my files from the last few years, sure, that's really easy, but when I go back to those early files, and cleaning those up, which now I'm pretty close to being done with all of it, it's a lot more work to have to rework something. So the advice is do it right the first time. And those keywords, I love that I can, anytime I want, like go on to my little app and put in Albert Pujols' name, and every single photo I've taken of Albert through my entire career pops up, and I can search by, I like date created, because I like the organization of from B, and pull up, and then I can send it to La Vida. I can post it on social media. Oh, it's Albert Pujols hit his, what I can, post a photo and grab an old one. And it's really an incredible, valuable tool to be able to be on the fly and use this to be able to search and send and do whatever you need to do with it with clients. So that's it. That's my tip.
Love that. Thanks for that. We get our next questions here. What's the best piece of advice you've received from a mentor, and what's one piece of advice you'd give to photographers right now? The first photo here is from Darren as well.
Okay, so back when I first moved to Austin, early to mid 1990s, there were a bunch of magazines that you could work for. Sport magazine, Inside Sports. You could always find someone to shoot a football game for, especially a Texas football game. I made this picture. I fell in love with this picture. This was, I was a voracious reader of Sports Illustrated. I could tell you everything about all the pictures they ran. And when I looked at this picture, I'm like, this is a Sports Illustrated picture. I'm ecstatic that I made this picture. Manual focus, Nikon lens, and it has everything that you would want. Can't wait to show this to people. So fast forward a year or two, and I'm up in the office, as I, had said, I'd been assisting for Sports Illustrated and gotten to know the editors. And Steve Fine, the magazine's director of photography, agreed to look at my portfolio. And I look back on that portfolio now and I just kind of laugh at some of the stuff that was in it. And I give Steve a lot of credit for being as nice as he was when he looked at it. But this picture obviously was in there because I was so proud of this picture. And Steve looked through my portfolio and he was very diplomatic about things. And he closed the book and he handed it back to me, and that was it. And nice work or whatever. And I just kind of sat there, and I don't know how it developed, but he seemed to sense that I wasn't done and I had something that I wanted to say or ask him. And so the conversation kind of continued. And first piece of advice, folks, never do what I'm about to tell you I did. I took the book, I opened it to this picture, and I put it in front of him. And I said, what do you think about that? And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but I will never forget what he said to me in response. And that was, I get 5 of these a week from John Beaver and Al Tealmans. Why would I send you when I can send them? I thought about it for a second, and he said, I want to see why I would send you, not that you can do something that everybody else can do or that other people that I hire can do. I want to see what you can do that other people can't. And that was probably the best piece of advice that I ever got from him.
And that's a piece of advice you give to photographers as well?
I would give that to them, but let me give you one other piece of portfolio advice, and I'm going to repeat something that was told to me by my good friend Porter Binks, who used to be at USA Today when I was at Georgetown, and then was at Sports Illustrated as well. But Porter was one of the first people to ever look at anything that resembled a portfolio of mine, and he said to me, never forget, people are going to remember the worst picture in your book. So I thought that was really good advice, and I want to pass that along to everybody, because I don't get a lot of people asking me to look at their work, but when they do, it's really easy to get attached to a picture because you know what's gone into making that picture, and you are particularly proud of a picture, or it's of Tiger Woods, or just an average picture, but just of somebody that you are proud to have been on the sidelines with, or something like that. But I'm going to remember that you showed me a mediocre picture of Tiger Woods before I'm going to remember that you are a good documentary photographer, or that you have an eye for light or something like that. So yeah, never forget, people will always remember the worst picture in your portfolio.
Thank you for that. Hey, before I jump into Jean's photo, I want to remind everyone that we're going to take live questions. We might run over 1 p.m., so stick around for that. And definitely submit your questions in the questions box so we can keep track of them and float them to Jean and Darren when we finish up. Let's go to Jean's here. What's the best piece of advice you've received from a mentor?
Well, I also have some Steve Fine advice, Darren, but I'll leave that now, since we already touched upon Steve Fine. But I did get incredible advice from him, and to this day still do. So he's certainly been instrumental in my career, and editing photos and teaching me what a good photo is, and certainly what one isn't. So a piece of advice that important to me, I will go to Brad Mangian for that. And Brad Mangian told me very long ago to always have a plan. And he always had a plan when he went to the ballpark. And he actually told me that at a football game that I met him at a 49ers game. But every single shoot I go to this day, I always have a plan, and it doesn't mean that it's rigid, and it doesn't mean that you can't adjust, and that you need to adjust, because sometimes plans don't work. But if you have a plan, for sure you're going to be a lot more ready for what it is that's happening, and even for surprises, and you have a better chance of more consistency in getting the results that you're looking for. And this is just an example of, say, a one-day plan that I had just a few years ago at National Park in DC, and I was shooting a series there. And before the series began, looked at the rosters to familiarize myself with who's playing, who's out hurt, and then who might be pitching for the series. And I see that Max Scherzer's pitching, which is good news for me for one of the games. And I also know at that point he's close to his 2000th career strikeout. And so that's exciting. So my plan is going to be Max for the day. And what do? I get there early and I figure out what positions I want to shoot him from. Is there something to be made in the bullpen while he's warming up? What angle might that be? What's behind home plate? Where could I be shooting from there? Is there a possibility for that? What does it look like on both sides? What does it look like at first? What does it look? What are my backgrounds? And it's preparation. I mean, for a lot of people, I hear about creativity as something more dreamy. You sleep and you wake up with your next brilliant idea and some subliminal echoes, and that's never happened to me. For me, it's always just planning, getting there early, and hard work and lots of study. And so for this with Max, Max comes out early, and I'm there and I'm waiting, and I get a moment of him sitting in the dugout, and he happened to be completely alone, which was great. So I got this, my first picture of him is just sitting there by himself, and that starts off the day. And then he walks off to the bullpen to warm up, and then my shooting begins, and I pay attention to how many strikeouts he has and waiting to get close, and I shoot my angles. I go behind home plate, and there it was you're one level up the home plate position. It makes a very pretty picture. And then when the time came and I know we're close to the strikeout, I have the position that I want, and I change cameras because I want a wider angle, because I want a scoreboard and I want to tell the story, right? So I wanted to hopefully, ideally, it's going to have his name and it's going to have the batter's name. And then maybe the ballpark will celebrate, maybe the team's going to celebrate his 2,000 strikeout. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm anticipating and ready for it if it is going to happen. So it happens, and sure enough, after getting the shot of that, then they put on the scoreboard, and he walks off the mound a bit. He goes back on and he kind of tips his cap, not too much, nothing flashy, obviously, but enough to make a picture. And then after that picture, this picture shows up, and it was kind of my bonus fun shot. And I just love that followed right after the whole series that I got was, those of you who know Max, he has one brown eye and one blue eye. So he has a unique look. And so his eyes popped up on the scoreboard after the 2000 career strikeout. And it was just a fun after picture. It ended up being my favorite one of the day out of all of them. But the whole series tells a story. So that's the advice from Brad Mangian. And Brad does that every single time he goes to the ballpark, is he has a plan and he does his homework, and you get your shots more consistently when you do that. You know what's happening. And the advice I would give, obviously, is to have a plan. But the other piece of advice that I would give to photographers is to network and find your mentors, and study those who came before you, because there's so much to learn from those photographers, those iconic photographers that buy their books. Don't look at it. I mean, this is great for Photo Shelter for searching, but when you're looking at images, buy the books and look at them in print and study them. The Michael Zagaris and Neil Leifer and Kaufman and Walter and David Burnett and all of those, John Zimmerman, and I can go on and on. And I've learned so much of them. I still do, and I have their books, and I keep them open, and I study those images. And I'm a classic thinker, and it's what I like. It's my style, but that's the advice.
Love that. Great advice. And I love this photo too. I didn't know the story about his eyes, so that makes it even more special knowing that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Before we jump into questions from the viewers, we thought it'd be fun if Jean and Darren asked the question to each other. So they've prepared a question for each other. So Darren, let's hear your question for Jean.
Okay, so Jean, I would love to know about the process of your book, how you came about deciding that you wanted to create it, how you created it, and basically how something like that works, because I have never had the guts to even think about doing something like that. It's frightened me a little bit, and I'm just curious as to how it all came about for you and what your thoughts are on the process and whether it's or how rewarding it's been for you.
Thanks, Darren. I like you, the personal projects, like you said earlier, can be the most rewarding. And that really resonated with me because my personal project of grassroots baseball has been an ongoing project to this day. And while I traveled shooting the major league game and the professional game, I always took time to shoot the grassroots game. You know, if I'm shooting winter league in the Dominican Republic during the day, I'm walking in the streets and going to new towns and trying to find baseball, street baseball, pickup games, old men playing stickball on the streets of New York City. You know, whatever is happening, that amateur game is so interesting to me. And after a while, it became quite a collection of images that really haven't been seen. It was just a personal project. It was just for me. And during my tenure with the Baseball Hall of Fame, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of the Hall of Famers, doing projects with them and shooting portraits of them, and also hearing their stories about what it was like in their early days of baseball, growing up playing baseball. And the stories are just fantastic. You know, every Nolan Ryan's story, talking about his father, Cal Ripken Jr.'s story and his family, Vladimir Guerrero's story of growing up in such extreme poverty with so many brothers and sisters and working on a farm and not being able to go to school. And I came up with the idea of tying these legends into this amateur baseball, into this grassroots baseball, and telling their stories, a lot of stories that, you know, we haven't heard before, of their early years. Johnny Bench growing up in a town of under 800 people in Binger, Oklahoma. And they're just lovely stories, and it's what made the book a special book. And so, and, you know, then seeing kids just like them playing the game and for the love of the game. And that's kind of what it was about. That's how it started out for all these guys. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about contracts. It was about the love of the game before they knew that any of that was going to happen. So that's how the book came about. And the process of making the book, Darren, which is a great question because it was the ultimate in learning and editing lesson. And thanks to Steve Fine, who was the editor of the book, it was a tremendous learning curve for me, a very steep learning curve, you know, and I learned that making a book is not just putting images on a page. You know, there's so much more to it. It's about how pictures tell a story and how they work together in layouts and scale and, you know, going wide, going tight, all the little nuances, you know, having the pacing in chapters and everything that you learn about making a book. It's so different than just editing for a website or and then, of course, you only have a certain amount of pages that the publisher gives you, and you have to tell the story. I mean, 15 chapters, very different regions. And so it was 15 stories that we had to tell. The big lesson, the editing lesson, was there's not a picture in that book that makes me cringe. You know, every one of them I'm proud of. And I fought, you know, and Steve Fine can tell you the stories, and they'd say, but why? And how about this? And now, you know, thank you, Steve Fine. I'm very proud of every photo that's in that book, and it's the editing lesson of the century for me.
Love that. I have a copy of the book behind me as well, so we love that book over here.
Thank you.
Jean, what about your question for Darren?
Well, my question, you know, with baseball and with football, and the more you know the sport and the more you shoot it, the more you shoot the same athlete or you shoot the same team, the better you know the game, the more consistently you get the shots, right? It's you know what an athlete's going to do. At least that's my experience with what I shoot. And I don't know anything about shooting golf. My friend Eric Risberg quite a lot. I'm sure you know Eric, of course, you shot with him, and he was going to take me. I still want to go shoot a golf game, but I wonder if does that apply, that same idea of knowing the athlete, knowing the sport? Is that important to you getting the results that you're looking for?
Well, absolutely. Just the simple answer is absolutely. But I grew up playing golf. I was never any good at it. I'm still not any good at it. But I grew up sort of steeped in the traditions of, the etiquette and the process and all of that. So while I never was looking to become a golf photographer, I didn't get into the sports photography business thing. Gee, I wish I could go shoot golf all day long. But when I was given the opportunity, I at least knew enough to know about not shooting at the top of the backswing, not moving when somebody was getting ready to hit. And it's surprising how many people don't know that. But fortunately I did, but it doesn't end there, because when I went to my first professional golf event, despite having played golf for 25 years, I was not prepared for how mentally focused these players were. The concentration that it takes to play at that level is otherworldly. And I'm not just talking about somebody like Tiger Woods or Phil Mickelson. I'm talking about the guy who's 150th on the money list, or somebody on the LPGA's minor league tour, the Symmetric Tour. These people are so good. They are so focused on the task at hand. You don't understand how distracting you can be if you're in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. And for a long time, I was kind of walking on eggshells everywhere I went, until I started to get to know some of the caddies and some of the players and some of the personalities. And you start to learn what you can and can't, I don't want to say get away with, but, because you still have to always operate within the rules. But, John Daly, he couldn't care less what you were doing or how you were doing it when he's getting ready to hit a golf ball. He'll just walk up and hit it. Whereas, I'm not going to name any names, but my golf photography colleagues will probably know exactly who I'm talking about. There's a young lady on the LPGA who you can't look at without her getting upset at you. So you learn to stay away from some people, and you learn that you can be a little bit more comfortable, a little more relaxed, depending on who you're shooting. But knowing the game and knowing the players then does let you know, like, okay, this guy takes a long time to get ready. I've got a little bit of time to slide down here a couple more feet so that I can use the 400 instead of the 70 to 200. Or this guy walks right up to the ball and hits it, so I got to stop right here, wait, and just not move. And even if I want to shoot something else, I can't. So that helps a lot. It's become even more pronounced lately because I've started shooting a lot more for the professional organizations like PGA of America and the USGA. Like, you can't, if you're the USGA photographer at the US Open, you can't be the guy who's firing when Tiger is lining up a putt, or on over his ball in the putting green. You really can't be that guy. So depending on who you work for, it gets even a little bit more stressful sometimes. But yeah, you need to know the sport, you need to know the players. It's just like anything else, any other sport out there.
Great. I love that I love that we got a chance to have each other ask questions. But now we want to turn it over to you guys, all of the audience that is still here. Thanks for sticking around. We want to take some questions from you, and float them to Jean and Darren. So make sure you jot your questions down. I'm sure we have some already, Caitlin. So let us know.
Oh yeah. Tons and tons of questions about gear. Everybody always asks this, what are you all shooting with? I think that there's a big question about mirrorless versus DSLR these days. So do you guys mind sharing a little bit about what's in your kit? Darren, maybe you go first.
You want me to go? Okay. I am, for my action stuff, I am a Sony guy. I made the switch about the full switch about 2 years ago. For those of you who are familiar with Sony gear, I carry two A9 2 bodies, an A7R4 body, 400 2.8, 70 to 200 2.8, 24 to 70 2.8, 12 to 24 f4 lens. And then I also, one of the reasons why I love the Sony system is because it's adaptable. And so I can also bring out an old Canon FD 500 millimeter mirror lens every now and then. My Leica lenses from my Leica rangefinders will work on the Sonys. So I use those as well. When I do documentary work, I have, in addition to the Sony stuff, I like to use a Leica M240, 35, 50, 75, 90, 21 millimeter lenses on that. And for film work, which I still do when I can, and a lot of that is more personal stuff nowadays than anything else. I have a couple of Leicas. I have an M3, I have an M6, and I have Linhof 4x5s that I still use when I have the ability to dust them off and shoot some barbecue pitmasters or something like that with. So, yeah.
I love those photos, the barbecue photos. Those are great. And awesome. Someone had also asked if either of you are still shooting film. So that answers that question for JJ.
Not as much as I would want to. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Nobody really wants it. So for personal stuff, I can do it. Yeah.
Of course. What about you, Jean?
So also Sony, Sony A9 II is my go-to camera for most of my work, but also the Sony A7R4 for portraits and for stadium shots and landscape shots. That's a go-to camera for me for that and for portraits as well. And to answer the advantage of the camera for me is a few of the important things. Obviously, 20 frames per second doesn't hurt for action, so that's a big deal. I would think, Darren, having the silent shooting for Sony is probably, when you were mentioning with golf, I didn't even think about having to be that quiet, but
actually, I mean, and I don't mean to interrupt, Jean, but like it is such an integrated part of what I do now with those cameras that I don't even think to mention it anymore, because to me, it's just like, yeah, you're on the golf course, turn the sound off, done. The only thing I will say is it can get a little crazy when you keep it on 20 frames a second and silent at the same time, because all of a sudden you filled up a 64 gig card and you're like, what the hell did I just do? So,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't need the silence, but it's nice to have it if I'm shooting music for some reason. I use it, very seldom, but I didn't even think about it for golf, but it makes so much sense, obviously, for the silencer. But things like the having the screen on the back, obviously, and being able to see real time, which is such a big advantage to these, new Sony cameras. And, you make a lot less mistakes. You see right away if your exposure, if you're going from shade to sun on a, which happens like plenty in the circumstances that I'm in, and being able to make those adjustments fast, and seeing what you have real time is a pretty big deal. And also the screen comes out, and I spend a lot of time laying in dirt, and just trying to get different angles. And I still lay in dirt, but being able to put the camera completely on the ground and pulling out that screen, or when you're my height, doing your Hail Mary shot and being able to adjust screen and getting those shots is really a lot of fun. And I mean, there's just so many reasons. And my kit is very similar to Darren's as far as the 400 and 70 to 200 and 60 to 35 and 12 to 24. And I have a walk around 24 to 105, which is really fun if you're just doing one camera, one lens. And then a few primes. I really like the primes, the 85 and the 135 primes make such pretty portraits. So those are in my kit. And the primes really, I really am enjoying shooting with them to get a different look. You just get, especially that 135 lens makes some really pretty pictures. So that's gear.
Definitely. And a lot of great info just pushed out, just so everyone knows we are recording this. So you will be able to, go back and listen and, take notes should you want to get some new gear. Another great question, we talk kind of internally at Photo Shelter a lot about photo fails. So do you all have, you know, an instance, like what's the best photo that you just missed and what happened? Can you share that story? I don't know if any come to mind for you too.
I always try to forget those.
Yes.
I mean, oh, sorry, Darren.
Go ahead, Jean. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've got plenty of them, but I was in the Dominican Republic, and it was one of my first trips there, and I had someone who was driving me, and I was just a little bit shy about, you know, kind of asking for what I wanted, and I was shooting on the street, and then got back in the car and we were driving, and it was a friend of mine who's a retired scout, but I didn't know him that well, and also my Spanish is sketchy at best, and we walked by these kids who had baseball bats, and we were driving by them, and one of them had it was just such a great shot, and I just let it go by, and it haunted me. It still haunts me, really, because it was just this fabulous like moment that he had a machete in his hand. So it was just this, and they're just walking and playing, and you know, it's just not letting a moment go by and not being afraid to turn around and go back. And you know, of course, today I would absolutely, you know, run and go make that picture. But it's, you know, about taking chances, about not letting an opportunity go by. But there's mistakes for sure that you make, you know, and misses. Everybody has them. And most important is what Darren says, is trying, you know, I try to forget those, and you have to forget them, and you have to forget them really quickly. Goose Gossage gave this great bit of advice at one of our grassroots baseball clinics, and he talked about, you know, being on the mound and having a crummy night. And if you don't throw that in the garbage, you're going to go back and have another crummy night. And if you're shooting a game, or you're at an event and you have a miss, and we all have misses, and you sit there and you start chirping on the back of your camera, and you're going to miss the next thing. So you got to let that go. You got to throw it in the garbage, and you got to move on very quickly. And it's a lesson, and it's athletes have to do it all the time. You know, you have a bad night, you have a bad outing, you missed a catch. You know, the best thing you can do is, when you get up at bat, is hit a triple. So let it go, or else you're not going to have the opportunity. You're going to miss the next one.
Definitely. I love that.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. But you can't sit there and just, after you've missed it, you can't go, oh, I wish I'd been focused on the shortstop. Why was I on the second baseman? You know, you can't revisit it in your head. You just have to go on to the next picture. My one that I wish I had back was the PGA Championship at Bellerive in St. Louis 2 years ago. I was shooting for the club, so I didn't really have any interest in the news value of what was going on. It was more that I was there documenting it for the club and showing what the crowd sizes were like, and what the bleachers were like, and how everything was laid out, and more of a wide perspective than anything else. And on Sunday, Tiger was in the hunt. He was kind of out of it, but he could still make a run when he was on 18. And so I decided that the view from the back, looking up to the green with the giant grandstands and everything, is what I should be shooting. And it turns out that Tiger drained this putt and just went nuts, dead away from me in the opposite direction. And I just said, well, you know what? This was your job. You got the grandstand, and you've got Tiger, you know, little in the green, and he may be facing away from you and pumping his fist or whatever. And then when Brooks Koepka, the eventual champ, came walking down the fairway, I went back around to the other side of the green, which is the direction Tiger was facing him when he made that putt. And I looked back down the fairway, and I saw the giant scoreboard and a couple more grandstands. And I said, you idiot. This was the shot. Why the hell weren't you here? You could have gotten all of it. So that was that's a big fail that I remember.
I know we're running a little tight on time, so this will probably be the final question. You both obviously have really incredible personal work. And so a lot of people have been asking, sort of how you find the time to do it, and then how you go about actually, pitching some of those stories or trying to monetize that. Obviously, Jean, you have a book, which I think is a great example. But, what advice would you give to younger photographers who are pursuing those personal projects and want to, get them out into the world? Darren, maybe you want to start?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, like I said earlier, personal projects are often the most rewarding, and they will lead to other things. The Charreria project that we showed a picture from earlier didn't lead to anything in terms of a magazine story or a book or anything like that. But I now have a comprehensive answer for whenever I show my portfolio to an advertising agency or someplace like that says, show me what you've done on your own initiative. And it's not just one or two pictures. Jean has a book. I have this body of work that I think looks like it does because it's all me. It is all personal. You just kind of have to make the time. Right now, we have plenty of time. That's for sure. I am working on a little personal project now where I've just been walking around my neighborhood. I mean, we're shut down. Gyms aren't open. Yoga studios aren't open. Everything that people do to stay fit and stay sane in Austin, Texas, which is a pretty fit city to begin with, is shut down. And I've been wandering around my neighborhood finding people jumping rope in their driveways, doing Pilates in their front yard. I mean, it's just the way people find to keep themselves in shape is something that is, it resonates with people. It speaks to people. And I have editors who've been like, what have you been up to lately? And I send them this link on my site and they're like, yeah, okay. You're not just sitting there doing nothing. You're working. You're trying to be creative. And so that's been satisfying the past couple of weeks of craziness. It's been a good way to keep the creative juices flowing, so to speak. So
Definitely.
Find something you like. Find something that interests you, and stick with it. That's probably the best advice I could give. Don't force it. Just, yeah.
Yeah. And what about you, Jean? I mean, I guess it kind of sounds like, shooting baseball was a personal project to begin with when you were coaching. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the personal projects, and to answer the question of how do you get that work out there? How do you show that work? That I think, in so many ways, it's easier than ever to get your work at least out there with all the social media channels that are available and websites that are so easy to put together. I mean, the platforms that are available, and you can have a custom-made website in a day. I mean, if I can make a website, anybody can make a website, well, thanks to Photo Shelter, okay, for sure. And, it's plug and play, but it's a customized website, and it's absolutely beautiful. And there's so many things that you can do to showcase your work. So putting your portfolio together and showing that range of work, that you can do anything, that you are prepared, and that you can handle, whatever the assignment may be. So showing that work and showing that breadth of work is, you don't have to have a book and show up at Steve Fine's office anymore, like Darren had to do with a portfolio paper book. Well, that's a lot of work, going from door to door and, hoping somebody's going to flip through. Well, now this website's at your fingertips. So then it's networking and connecting. Who else out there in social media is doing what you're doing or might be interested in what you're doing, and connect with them and see if they'll have a look. It's much easier for someone to have a peek at your website, but have it ready and have it prepared and have your best work up there. Like Darren says, don't have the one you're not proud of in there. Take that out, edit it well, and show that work. Put your website together. Now's the time. And it's the things we can control right now is putting our best foot forward. So when we're back out there shooting, maybe we're better prepared and we have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves a little bit.
Incredible advice. Really great.
Yeah, I love that. For those of you who asked a question or want to ask a question, we're going to wrap up. So definitely tweet at us at PhotoShelter. You can connect with these two photographers on social and ask them any questions you'd like as well. But we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we want to hype up their PhotoShelter websites a little bit. So you can find Jean's PhotoShelter site at jeanfruithimages.com. Spectacular, colorful website. Tons of great stuff on there. You can also find Darren's PhotoShelter website at darrencarroll.com. A lot of awesome work on there as well. We have some exciting stuff that has been released recently and that is coming up that I'll let Caitlin speak to a little bit.
Yeah, so speaking of, personal projects, we have a brand new guide that's all about photo projects you can do at home. So, tons and tons of ideas, anything from shooting self-portraits to food photography. We have a 30-day photo challenge, so photographing the same thing once a day for 30 days, I think is super fun. Pet portraits, everybody, I think, takes really, really fun photos of the pets that they love when you, know them. So definitely feel free to check that out. That is available on our homepage in the resources section and through our blog. And really hope everybody enjoys it. That was done in partnership with Feature Shoot. And then next week on Friday, we have another really great webinar planned all about food photography composition. So this is with Darina Kopkok, who is an amazing food photographer and writer and educator. So she is actually going to kind of break down one of the courses that she teaches and condense that into an hour-long webinar. Really hope everyone will join us for that, and we will have a registration link on our blog up probably Monday for that. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and special thank you to Jean and Darren for sure. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed myself. I'm sure everyone enjoyed hearing from you two and seeing your faces on the webcam, so appreciate that. Appreciate waking up and different time zones and dealing with all that as well. So thank you to you both.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we'll catch you guys later.